This is the Capitol Rundown.
This governor has not done anything to help inflation, but I would put money back into your pocket.
What I would like to know is how Mrs. Dixon plans to balance a budget giving $12 billion away and not shifting costs onto you.
The bottom line on the debate was, these generally reinforce your love for the candidate that you love.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Lauren Thompson. The November election is now less than 10 days away, and the governor's race is as close as it's been all year. This weekend, the Capitol Rundown is here for you with a look at the second and final governor's debate. Proposal 3, inflation, and the Line 5 oil pipeline were all topics in that debate this week. Both Governor Gretchen Whitmer and her challenger Tudor Dixon also talked about modifying tax policies to put more money into your pockets. Take a listen.
Proposal 3 is absolutely necessary to preserve the rights we've had for 49 years under Roe v. Wade. When the Supreme Court decided to upend it and overrule Roe, Michigan was poised to revert back to a 1931 law that makes abortion a felony. No exceptions for rape or incest, throwing doctors and nurses in jail. The only reason it's not in effect right now is because of my lawsuit. We have an opportunity to enshrine Roe into law by supporting Ballot Initiative 3.
The governor has just been dishonest with you in her very first answer. We know that Proposal 3 does remove parental consent. It also makes it so that you don't have to be a doctor to perform an abortion. But it does align with her agenda. Her past, she's voted against a ban on partial birth abortion. And Proposal 3 allows abortion up to the moment of birth for any reason, including sex selection. There will be no legislating around Proposal 3 because it will be language in the Constitution. So we can't put those protections that we've had in place back in place, that we've had in place for all of these years.
A governor cannot fix global inflation, but what I can do is put more money in your pockets, and that's exactly what we've done. Working in a bipartisan way with a Republican legislature, we were able to help 150,000 families get free or low-cost daycare, money in the pocket. We were able to expand opportunities to have the state pick up a third of the cost of daycare for working families. And we also have put 170,000 Michiganders on the path to tuition-free skills. That's how we keep money in the pocket.
I've heard several times from Gretchen Whitmer that she'll work with anyone on anything and that she's bipartisan, but she's actually vetoed quite a bit of opportunity to put money back into the pockets of the people. She vetoed a child tax credit. She vetoed 2 opportunities to reduce the income tax. She also vetoed retirement help for retirement income. So when she's had the opportunity to actually do that, she's vetoed it. This governor has not done anything to help inflation, but I would put money back into your pockets. I would make sure we have that child tax credit. I would make sure that we reduce the income tax, and I would make sure that our seniors who are on a fixed income are not receiving more taxes than they should, and we can put more money back in their pockets.
We'd never raised the gas tax, number 1. In fact, we have cut taxes. Number 2, the bills Mrs. Dixon refers to were a gimmick. Republicans in Lansing wanted to tell you that they were cutting your taxes, but they didn't even take effect until spring of next year. I don't have time for games, and I don't think you do either. What I would like to know is how Mrs. Dixon plans to balance a budget giving $12 billion away and not shifting costs onto you. That's where I would be most concerned as we think about the cost shift onto people.
Well, another close race is shaping up in Michigan's new 7th congressional district between Democrat Elissa Slotkin and Republican Tom Barrett. Now, this week, Congresswoman Slotkin got some big name support from across the aisle. Liz Cheney is once again making waves among her own party by publicly endorsing Slotkin. Slotkin issued a statement in response, saying in part, "I'm grateful for her support in this race, and I'm proud of the work we've done together to strengthen our national security and America's role in the world." Tom Barrett also weighed in. He says, quote, "My entire adult life has been committed to service in the Army, and sadly, I've lost too many friends in America's endless wars. Now, establishment war hawks like Liz Cheney and Elissa Slotkin are standing together because I oppose their senseless thirst for more foreign entanglements. Representative Slotkin has already said she would commit U.S. soldiers to combat with China, so it's no surprise the Cheney family would join her. Slotkin can keep Cheney while I work to keep America out of war." Well, hundreds of thousands of absentee ballots have already been cast across the state ahead of Election Day. Up next, we take a look at what that could mean for results on election night. That story and more are next when the Capitol Rundown returns. Welcome back. Nearly 2 million absentee ballots have been requested by Michigan voters ahead of the midterm election. The state released the latest numbers this week, saying 1.8 million absentee ballots have gone out to voters, and more than 770,000 of them have already been returned. According to Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson, though, the high number of absentee ballots could cause some delays in election results, especially in close races. That's because those ballots can't be counted until after the polls close. Now, this is something we saw happen in the 2020 election. The state did attempt to address it ahead of time. Lawmakers did approve a bill allowing clerks to pre-process absentee votes 2 days before Election Day to speed up counting processes. But Benson says the new law won't make a difference this year.
The reality is that the pre-processing legislation enacted late and without any additional funding has, and we told this to everyone involved in the deal, it was not one that we were really going to be able to act on. Because of the lateness and the lack of funding.
Well, Benson says it could be up to 24 hours after the polls close before we get some results, especially in those races that are too close to call. Also on the election front this week, 3 former Republican Michigan Secretaries of State, Ruth Johnson, Candace Miller, and Terry Lynn Land, are urging voters to reject Proposal 2. That ballot issue deals with changes to the state's election laws. However, the former state elections director, who worked with all 3 former secretaries, says they've got it wrong.
I respect all 3 of the former secretaries of state. I enjoy working for them. And, they're politicians. They've got, their views. And I just disagree with it.
Well, he went on to say that Proposal 2 doesn't offer anything new that isn't already being done in other states, including allowing early voting in person 9 days before the election. Well, now to some political news from a courtroom in Jackson County. After just 1 day of deliberation, 3 men who played a role in a plot to kidnap the governor were found guilty on all charges. Now, Joe Morrison, his father-in-law Pete Musico, and Paul Ballar could all spend decades in prison. It was a big victory for state prosecutors and a big loss for the defense.
They wanted to make sure that these individuals were correctly convicted of the crimes that they had committed.
Well, all 3 men are expected to be sentenced on December 15th. Up next here on the Capitol Rundown, we touch base with Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic to get his take on all the happenings in Michigan politics this week. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, we've talked about the final governor's debate and many other issues. Now it's time to talk to our Capitol correspondent, Tim Skubic. He's here to share his expert opinion on the last matchup between candidates ahead of Election Day.
Tim, so we heard the second debate. It was held this week between Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Tudor Dixon. And what are your thoughts on how it went?
Well, it was pretty clear that Tudor Dixon was on the offensive most of the night. The governor gave back also, so it was a good exchange between the two of them. The ultimate question is, what's the impact on the election? I think on a scale of 1 to 10, it might be a 4 or maybe even a 5, because here's the harsh reality of debates. If you go into this debate liking Gretchen Whitmer, you obviously came out liking Gretchen Whitmer. Ditto for Tudor Dixon. So that leaves the undefined, undecided mass in the middle, which is really not a mass at all. It's about 3 to 6% of the people who have been on the fence. Some of those folks will never vote, so they're out of the equation. Some of them will vote for a third-party candidate, which leaves an even smaller number that it could have been impacted by this debate. Now, if you believe the polls that the governor has about a 6-point lead, let's say that the 2% of people that were undecided undecided that are available to vote go to Dixon. The governor still wins by 4 percentage points. So the bottom line on the debate was, these generally reinforce your love for the candidate that you love, and the chances of them crossing over, that Dixon people going to Whitmer or vice versa, is pretty slim.
What does the governor need to do you think, to get those remaining votes?
Look, this is all about turnout. This is about knocking on doors. This is about making phone calls. This is making sure that the troops are motivated to show up at the polls. Now, the Democrats have a slight edge here in that the number of absentee voters in Michigan are probably going to be about 50% of the total vote count on election night. And generally, Democrats use the absentee ballots a little more than Republicans, although we've seen an uptick in Republicans using absentees as well. So that could be the deciding factor here.
And what are your thoughts about the possibility of delayed results after Election Day?
The state passed a law that allowed local clerks to tee up the absentee ballots 2 days before the election so that they could quickly count them on election night. Well, come to find out, Secretary of State Benson says the law's not going to work. In fact, only 19% of the jurisdictions in Michigan are going to use this new law. So do the math. If you've got about 2 million absentee votes and they're not teed up to be counted on election night, how long will it take to count absentee ballots numbering 2 million or less? Apparently, the Secretary of State says it'll take a full day, and we'll have the full election results the day after the election, around maybe 8 o'clock or a little bit sooner. In other words, your anchor people on election night are not going to call a lot of these races because they simply won't be able to do it.
Well, thank you both. Coming up, the State House and Senate are up for grabs, and the same is true in D.C. We'll take a look at the efforts to gain control when the Capitol Rundown comes right back. For the first time in decades, both political parties have a shot at controlling the Michigan House and Senate. For the first time in 38 years, in fact, the Democrats have a good shot at winning control. They just need to get to 19 votes. Now, if they do, and if Democrat Garland Gilchrist is presiding over the Senate, they would have 20 votes to control that chamber. The Republicans, however, are confident that they'll win more seats and maintain control there. There's also a tough battle for control in the State House, and this year brings a twist because of the new voting lines drawn by the state's Independent Redistricting Commission.
We have 110 seats. And so when you look at the new level playing field, there's a field of about 8 seats where we are head to head with Republicans. And that's what's going to decide majority.
And it's not just here in Michigan. Control of our nation's capital is also up for grabs this year. And a well-known former athlete is at the center of one of the most contested races. Skylar Henry is here now with the latest from D.C.
Republican Senate candidate Herschel Walker campaigned in Cumming, Georgia Thursday morning, but did not address the most recent allegations that he paid for a former lover to have an abortion.
They come after me today, they're going to come after you tomorrow, but I can tell you right now, they can't take me down because I'm a bad man, and I can tell you that right now.
The woman, who has not been identified, said she had a 6-year affair with the former football star when he was married. She said that in April of 1993, she found out she was pregnant and told Walker she couldn't go through with the abortion.
He was upset and said that he was going to go back with me to the clinic the next day for me to have the abortion.
Walker denied the allegations when they came out Wednesday, and his supporters say they're not concerned.
The past is the past. I'm more concentrating on the future and what he can do for us in terms of this economic crisis.
Walker is in a tight race with incumbent Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock. The Georgia race is one of the few toss-up elections that will determine which party controls the U.S. Senate. Pennsylvania Senate candidate John Fetterman told supporters in Pittsburgh that this week's debate, so soon after his stroke in May, was one of the toughest things he's ever done.
Knew it wasn't going to be easy after, having a stroke after 5 months. In fact, In fact, I don't think that's ever been done before in American political history before.
His Republican challenger, Dr. Mehmet Oz, has cut down Fetterman's lead by focusing on crime.
In Philadelphia, almost every day I wake up and open the paper, wonder how many people did we lose? Not did we lose anybody, but how many did we lose?
A CBS News poll out Tuesday shows Oz and Fetterman virtually tied. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Well, up next here on The Rundown, no matter who wins or loses, Michigan's next governor will be a woman. And more women are running for that office in states across the country than ever before. We have a look at this growing trend for you when the Capitol Rundown returns. It's a historic race for governor here in Michigan as two women are vying for the spot. It's a theme across the country. A record number of women are running for the governor's office. There are currently 9 women governors and more than 24 others are now in the running. Skyler Henry is here for you now with why political watchers say this trend is here to stay.
From Massachusetts to Oregon to Georgia, it's a banner year for women in politics. 25 women are major party nominees in races for governor, a record for both Democrats and Republicans.
We're not as used to seeing women in those executive roles. And so voters have to break out of any sort of subconscious barriers they have.
19 states have never had a female governor. And while 70 women have been major party nominees in the last 16 years, compare that to the 350 men who've had their names on the ballot.
More and more women can run. More and more women can win.
Kathleen Kennedy Townsend served as Maryland's lieutenant governor for 8 years, but came up short in her 2002 bid for the state's top job. She says national issues, including the Supreme Court decision on abortion rights, could motivate more potential candidates.
Do you think that we'll see even more women run because of something like that?
Yes, I think we will.
A record number of women are also facing off against each other in governor's races. In 5 states, both of the major party nominees are women.
In the last few years, we've seen women get more involved in politics because of the impact on their families. They want to have a say in their child's education, in making sure that their children are provided for, that they have an economic future.
Advocates are pushing to give more women a fair shot.
We still have these women who are breaking barriers where they are going somewhere that no woman like them has ever been. We love the first. We should celebrate the first. We're ready for the 38th, right? Like we're ready for the 29th or however many where we stop counting.
And this crop of 2022 candidates is ready to see a shift in state leadership. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Washington.
Well, if you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, we have just the thing for you. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just 1 email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at the screen right now. This will take you to the sign-up page, or you can head to WLNS.com/newsletters. Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown. We hope to see you back here again next weekend.